Hello everyone, my name is Claudia.
And my name is REESHA. And today we are going to have a discussion on a television show that is both ambitious and groundbreaking for television in Australia for Indigenous culture. The TV show Redfern Now focuses on the contemporary lives of Indigenous Australians living in a Sydney suburb. Although most television shows focus on hardship, family dysfunction, violence, and situational challenges, Redfern Now follows these storylines with a much deeper meaning that exposes the further hardships Indigenous Australians have in a 21st century Australia.
So we chose to discuss Redfern Now in great depth due to a comment that we read in an article written by Melinda Houston in the Age newspaper. She wrote, "It makes for television that works on every level, an important cultural contribution, as well as a vehicle for sensational actors, writers, directors, and technicians, as a great conversation starter and a fabulous piece of drama. This is an interesting statement as it exposes the truth surrounding Indigenous culture. It demonstrates the need for Indigenous Australian culture in our community to be presented through media, specifically television, and is highly accessible to the majority of the community and makes an impact for a greater number of individuals. Redfern Now is aired on SBS, ABC, and Netflix, so it's a wide range of audience, which allows for the message that Indigenous Australians that live in suburbia needs to be presented truthfully and also not stereotypically."
Redfern Now represents the Aboriginal culture in suburban areas of Sydney. It is not a series, nor is it entirely episodic. It is also not a depiction of white versus Indigenous people. It was written by Indigenous Australian writers, which represents the challenges and prejudice faced by Indigenous people, such as child custody, identity, socioeconomic status, domestic violence, crime, mental health, and bitter neighbourhood disputes, as well as class, race, culture, and intellectual altitude. Redfern Now is relatable to not only Indigenous Australians, but also all Australians in general. The challenge of identity and belonging in a multicultural community are challenges that may be faced by a large number of Australians. The characters in the series demonstrate a real community presence where they range from young to old, single to families, and also vary in socioeconomic status.
In the first episode, a woman gets her sister committed to a psych ward and looks for a place to house her sister's children before she leaves on a family holiday. Her other sister will only take one of the children, and then she is left with a terrible decision on where to leave the other. This decision jeopardizes the safety of these two children, who both leave the places they are staying, find each other, and walk 10 kilometres to go find their mother. So in the fourth episode of season 1, there is an issue that may be presented not only to an Aboriginal community, but also to a multicultural community. A 16-year-old boy loves his new school. However, his highly patriotic Aboriginal father does not want him to sing the national anthem, jeopardizing his scholarship. Every action taken in this series exposes a spiraling set of complications that may also be parables to any sort of life lesson.
So this series represents the everyday lives of the Aboriginal community in the suburbs. It challenges the traditional perception and stereotype of all Indigenous Australians living in remote rural areas and instead portrays the life of Indigenous Australians residing in suburban areas. Redfern Now emphasises socioeconomic differences, racism and justice. It represents the low socioeconomic statuses of Indigenous Australians living in Redfern and their struggles to provide for their family whilst looking after each other in their community. Redfern Now demonstrates the sense of harmony and union among Indigenous Australians in Redfern, as they appear to be one big family who support one another. The series emphasises the importance of looking after and supporting one another in the Indigenous Australian culture. Redfern Now also portrays the racism faced by Indigenous Australians based on skin colour, culture, socioeconomic status, as well as stereotypes. It also exposes the stereotype of ignorance from non-Aboriginal Australians, such as in the second episode where the taxi driver wouldn't continue his journey past Redfern town line as it was too dangerous to be in the Aboriginal community.
The series is quite distinct from other documentaries about Indigenous Australian as it focuses on suburban life of these people rather than the traditional stereotype in a rural or remote location. Television shows such as Neighbours or Home and Away fill their storylines with insane events or tragedies for ratings. However, the uphill battles observed in Redfern show the ongoing conflicts and high stakes that exposes real truth to life in an Australian suburb, as well as explaining how there is more conflicts in life than there are resolutions due to certain decisions.
Redfern Now emphasises issues of racism and justice as the Indigenous Australian characters in the series are faced with struggles that are aggravated by society due to their Indigenous Australian background. The ethical issue that is raised by this show is that the happenings that occur to Aboriginal Australians are okay in society. Redfern Now also presented a telemovie after the second season, and the issue is raised surrounding the culture and socioeconomic status of an Aboriginal woman. She is accused of fabricating a rape complaint against a Caucasian man who states she initiated the act and asked for money. In a later scene in court, majority of the jury consists of Caucasian individuals, and the prosecutor uses the Aboriginal woman's low socioeconomic status against this woman by questioning her character and urging her to make truth to the fake claims, whilst highlighting the higher status of the Caucasian male. Although the final verdict was guilty, the court scene demonstrated the demeaning behaviour directed towards the Indigenous Australian woman and indicates racism and injustice that may be faced by Indigenous Australians in the real world.
So Redfern now presents different aspects of diversity that may affect a community. It mainly focuses on cultural diversity and racism, however, also looks into the differences of socioeconomic status, geographical differences, and sexuality, both within the community and outside the community. Within the community, there is a focus of sexism, racism, socioeconomic differences, and ageism. And a few of these different aspects are seen in the second and third episode of the first season. When a woman gets rammed by a car, you see an innocent man in the car call the ambulance and try to help because of their mistakes. Her response was, "You black shit." This depicts racism even within the community. In the third episode, a man and his wife have a house and 4 kids. Although being nominated for an award for his services to the community due to his celebrity status, he is investigated for claiming benefits from the government. In this episode, you see the shift in socioeconomic status within the community.
The series places emphasis on the identity clash between Aboriginal and Australian culture. There are several scenarios where an Indigenous Australian is pressured to choose between supporting their Aboriginal culture and family and choosing to support himself or herself alone. Although the main focus of the series is Indigenous Australians, there are also non-Indigenous Australian characters throughout the series. This is unlike majority of past and present Australian television, which consists mostly of Caucasian characters with little cultural diversity among the cast.
It can be seen that Redfern now raises awareness for Indigenous Australian culture and the struggles that many people face, mainly with their identity within mainstream society. A series such as this may influence current society to reassess the stereotypes placed upon Aboriginal Australians, and the audience of the series ranges from teenagers to adults. The series may influence teenagers and increase their awareness of multicultural television and the way both Australians and Aboriginal identity is depicted on current television shows. It may also allow them to question the current identity they possess to what they see on TV and to what they see in society. Redfern now may also have a positive impact on Aboriginal Australian community as they feel more empowered to see themselves as being represented on television by not just that stereotypical sense, but by their own community, especially those residing in Redfern, Sydney.
The Department of Education states that Victoria will be a state where the rich and thriving culture, knowledge, and experience of our First Nations peoples are celebrated by all Victorians. Our universal service systems, such as education, are inclusive, responsive, and respectful of Aboriginal people at every stage of their learning and developmental journey. Every Aboriginal person achieves their potential, succeeds in life, and feels strong in their cultural identity.
After careful discussion between the two of us, we would use this series in our professional development as a teacher in order to remind ourselves that our classroom needs to be kept inclusive of all cultures and sensitive to all Indigenous Australian backgrounds. It may also be used to show students how Indigenous people live and how they deal with experiences in their lives, as most of these issues are not just Aboriginal based, but are societal based.
We would also share this with students to demonstrate that Indigenous Australians do not only live in remote areas and to challenge their preconceptions and stereotypes. A documentary series such as Redfern Now may also increase the awareness of students regarding Indigenous Australians as the custodians of the land and their cultural identity.
The intercultural capability in the Victorian curriculum is quite necessary for all students to obtain. The interactions faced in an everyday multicultural and globalised society allows for students to become citizens on a global level. The capacity also allows students to delve deep into their own cultures, as well as others, which actually develops cultural mutual respect. The capability aims to develop awareness of and respect for cultural diversity within a community and on a large scale, the influences of intercultural experiences have on attitudes, values, and beliefs, the importance and acceptance and appreciation of cultural diversity, the cohesive community. From the capabilities, there is an understanding that the series can be used to demonstrate Indigenous Australian culture and practices in today's society compared to the traditions in the past. Thank you for listening.